My last observation was also great. It was very positive, and we had a really good conversation in my post-observation about, how things, what's this kind of journey that you've taken to get to this point? How did things turn around the way that they did? And then, 2 weeks later, I was told that I was not being rehired. So I think a big part of my frustration and my sadness over the whole thing was a lot of confusion and just hurt, honestly, and disbelief of feeling like I got such positive feedback. I was feeling so good. We'd kind of heard rumors we were going to hear by a certain date. We didn't hear. I was feeling like maybe we're out of the woods. Maybe we're okay. Maybe we're not going to lose our jobs. And then, a week later, I was let go. So I think it was a lot of feeling just disappointed and kind of hurt. And like you gave me this really false sense of hope, I think.
Hi, everyone. You're tuned in to a Face Project podcast, stories told in first-person format by people from around the world to help broaden our understanding of the human experience. I'm Natalie Jennings. I'm your host, and this is episode number 29. Welcome to a Face Project podcast. Face Project podcast.
Hello?
It's just pure life. It's pure innocence.
My mom
it's
is a
pure
writer.
gratitude.
So I ended up in America.
I am an adopted Korean and have been all my life.
It's a perfect blend of science and creativity.
I was screaming, I will live over here till I die.
If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, then you know that we've been working hard at a Face Project for over 4 years now. We took a little hiatus in the middle to rebrand and reformat, but some of the content that I have stored away from past interviews has yet to be released. And because our aim is to try and keep things timeless, we're not necessarily reporting on current events, but the stories that are told are intended to be interesting and inspiring and educational sort of any time that you decide to tune into them. So with that thought in mind, I have resurrected some older interviews that I thought still were relevant today. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before in previous episodes, but I used to be a high school English teacher. I did a graduate degree in urban education and teaching, and that meant that most of my teaching experience was in an inner city urban situation. I had and have, I suppose, a strong background in classroom management and other things that seem to be big challenges for teachers. So what I thought I'd do before diving into this interview, which is about education and teaching, is ask around and see what people thought was the hardest part about being a teacher. And I checked Quora and Reddit and even posted in our A Face Project community group on Facebook. If you're not familiar with that, just hop on Facebook and look for A Face Project community and join us. And so I thought I'd grab, 3 or 4 answers and read them off here as just a little bit of a background and set up for Rebecca's story today. So what is the hardest part about being a teacher? Jeremy Hiscock, a high school science teacher, said that balancing work life with family life. It is so easy to get lost spending hours upon hours preparing the, quote, best lessons. John Cohen, who taught K-12 environments at the college level, said the hardest part of being a teacher is being on for 6.5 hours a day. Teaching requires a good deal of multitasking, and during the day there is very little time to catch one's breath. One must pay attention to all that is going on in the classroom. Kim Barrow, who is a teacher, said hours, workload hours and hours, work, and a salary that has no true reflection of the skill level, multidisciplinary activities expected, and time spent active in this profession. that is one thing that I can certainly speak to, and one of the sort of motivating forces for me, unfortunately, that caused me to leave teaching was just the amount of time required, the compensation for that time. And so I'm not sure what your experiences are if you are a teacher, but those are just some thoughts that I randomly gathered from folks. And I think it would be kind of fun to hear from you guys if you are part of our group. There is an Attention Teachers post that I put up, and I'd love to hear positive and negative experiences. It would be a great addition to this episode. We can post some of the comments on the episode page as well. You're about to hear from Rebecca. Rebecca is a teacher. She and I were in graduate school together, and that is how we met. So without further ado, here's Rebecca's story.
Different, obviously, when it happens to you. I mean, I was so, and I'm still sad and disheartened by it, and I love my coworkers, and I don't want to leave, and I feel like I don't know how people do this every year. I can't imagine going through this every single year. If this is what it's going to be like, I don't know if I have it in me to go through this all the time. My name is Rebecca, and I have been a teacher for about 4 years in the classroom. Teaching is kind of a second career for me. I taught piano lessons for a long time. That was my full-time job. And I decided I really wanted to move forward in education and do other things. So I got my teaching license. I knew that really the reason I was doing that is just because I wanted to be a teacher and not because I wanted to be self-employed or do all of those other things. So I went back to school in 2009 and I got my master's in teaching and my teaching license. I taught for 3 years in a charter school, first grade and third grade, and then this was my first year in a public school teaching first grade. So the school I'm at this year is a suburban, fairly diverse public school. I have 22 kids right now. I've had several come and go. It's not a super transient population, but there's a few that come and go. This school has huge special needs population. They're sort of the special ed center for the district. Apparently the legend is it started because they were the only school with an elevator, so all the kids who needed help transporting themselves had to come here, and it just kind of grew into this school that is where kind of the special ed kids all the schools have it, but they have a really big program here. There's over 1,000 kids. It's K-6 with the early childhood center. There are 6 sections of every grade. It's giant, yeah. This class has been an interesting kind of journey. We had a really difficult beginning of the year. I had a couple of kids who just had a very, very difficult time both kind of together and functioning in the regular ed classroom. They both ended up getting moved, which was really painful to have them just kind of taken away and shuffled around, and it was hard on everybody. It was hard on the new teacher who had this feeling like, well, here, maybe you can handle him. It was hard on me getting that message that, maybe somebody else can deal with this better than you can. I think that what's ended up happening is that's not really been the case, and it's just that it's an environment that they're not thriving in. But anyway, the beginning of the year was very difficult. I had a really hard time personally just doing my job. My first observation was really not good at all. It was very sad and depressing and disheartening. But I worked really, really hard to turn it around. I spent so much time just thinking about ideas of how we were going to change things and talking to my students, and I think one of the upsides to it is it created a really great sense of community in this classroom that we wanted to work together, we wanted things to go in a different direction and be better. So the year is ending on a great note, and we've ended up being a really cohesive, strong class. So teachers get observed typically 3 times a year, and it's a very kind of random sample of whenever they happen to come in. Sometimes they'll specify that they want to see math or something specific, but otherwise they just come in for 45 minutes to an hour, and they just watch what you're doing, and then you have a post-observation afterwards in which you discuss what was seen. A lot of it is focused on classroom management. So if they come in and see that your students are not under control, they're not engaged, then the observation is not going to be what it could be. I think that a lot of people get very nervous about observations, obviously, because they're being judged and they're on display. But I think something that I have been, that I've done in the past that has been a mistake is you kind of try to put on this show and you try to do this big production and look at how great I can be. And you should really just keep it much simpler than that and just do what you're used to doing in ordinary, normal stuff, because there's no reason to try to go over the top, because then things end up even more unnatural. For classroom management, I think that something I was really struggling with was having a couple of kids who just really, through no fault of their own, had a very difficult time functioning in a situation where they either were not being given all of the attention that they thought that they needed, or sitting still for any sustained amount of time. And what happens is those kids start to kind of go, and then the rest of the group feels like, especially over time, well, why should I bother doing the right thing? Because they just get to act crazy, and we either just have to ignore them, or they get sent somewhere for a few minutes and they come right back. So everybody else starts to kind of give up as well, and I don't blame them. So I think that was a lot of what it was, honestly, is there was a couple of kids who were really struggling, and then a lot of the rest of the group kind of started to go. And so I just took some time and I talked to different mentors and people who knew that I really wanted to get things back on track, and kind of took one little piece at a time and talked to the class really openly about what do we need to do to fix this, and we're going to focus on this one thing for this week, and we're just going to practice whatever it is. And so we are, again, clear about what the expectation is when we're in school and we're here to learn. I think that observations are so tricky because on one hand, I understand why they're necessary. I mean, schools are giant in some cases, and administrators have a lot of things to do, and there has to be an efficient way to evaluate people. I think that seeing people for a total of 2.5 hours per year is absolutely not an accurate representation of what's happening in their classroom. And so when that is your only feedback and the only thing that is going to determine if you are hired or not, I think that that's really not fair and just not accurate. I mean, there's so much else that goes on that they never see. And again, I understand that need for an efficient procedure that gets everyone attended to and all the other administrative stuff that they have to do. But it's frustrating as someone who has to go through it so much. So I had 2 more observations after the first one that didn't go well. The second one was a little bit better, and then there was a period of time where the principal was coming in fairly regularly to all of the classrooms and trying to get a little bit more of an idea about kind of what was going on. When that started to happen, at that point things had really started to kind of turn a corner, and things were going so much better. Both with relationships with the other students and classroom management-wise, and I got some really, really positive feedback from my principal, and just so much praise for the improvements that we're seeing and how the great strides that we had made from the principal and the district observers. Everyone who I was hired with, except for one teacher, has been let go for next year. None of us have really gotten a thorough explanation of what's happening. I think some people have reapplied for their jobs, some people have not. I've heard stories for years from friends who go through this all the time, or people they know who get pink slipped every year. I worked in a charter school before this, and charter schools don't do this. Not everyone, I shouldn't say, but a lot of people who work at charter schools are dying to get into the public schools. They pay better, there's way more resources, there's a lot more structure to public schools that helps you do your job a lot more efficiently. This is one of the few trade-offs, is that this kind of thing does happen, and I knew that going into this job. There's several things that I've really given a lot of thought to since this has all happened, and I don't mean for it to sound like I know my life is not that hard. I'm not even technically unemployed yet. I still have a job through the rest of the year, and I'll get paid through July. So I know I'm not desperate. I know it's not the end of the world, and I'm trying not to feel super sorry for myself. But I think that One thing I've really come to terms with over the past several years, I think, is that there's this very, I think it's American mentality of if you work hard, you should get what you want. And I found that I am really guilty of that sometimes, and I get it in my head that I did what you told me to do, where's my payoff? Where's my result that I expected from that? And so I think that that was a little bit of something I've had to get over, is this feeling of like, I worked so hard, and I did all of these things to try to improve the situation, to show you I want to work here, I think this job is so important, I want to be good at it, and I got fired anyway. And not that it was for nothing, but it's a roadblock, I think, for a lot of people to not get what they think they should get based on the work that they've done. So that's kind of something that I have just had to come to terms with, is like, I'm not the only person who works hard. I'm not the only person who cares. This is just how it goes sometimes. I think that overall, this job is not easy, and no one does it just because they can phone it in. Dealing with kids all day is challenging, and it's tiring, and it's exhausting, and people do it because they want to do this work. That being said, it is frustrating to know that I did work hard, and I know that I'm not the worst teacher here, and it's disheartening to know that maybe there are other reasons, but there's certainly a chance that I lost my job just because I happened to get hired on a certain year, as opposed to a different year when they weren't doing layoffs. I know that back in the mid-90s, when I was first in college, there was a huge need for teachers, and I was going to get my license and I didn't, and not that I regret that, because there's a million things that wouldn't have happened and what have you in the meantime. And then when the economy kind of went south in the early 2000s, a lot of people lost their jobs and went back to school to become teachers. And now there is an overabundance of teachers and not enough jobs for any of them. And it's, everyone who's a teacher, I think, thinks that knows that they love their students and they love teaching and they want to be an educator. And so it's very disheartening to know that you are working so hard for very little money. It's huge competition to get into this profession that doesn't even pay that well. And, so I think that I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I made the change. There's really nothing else I would want to do. But it's overwhelming. I've applied for probably 40 jobs already. I had 7 interviews in 3 weeks. I didn't get any of them. It's overwhelming to know how many people there are out there that want to do this work and want to be good at it. You hear all these messages about how broken education is and all the problems with the system. And I think a lot of teachers get very defensive about that because we feel like we are working our asses off to, it's kind of this mentality that then you try it, or you try to fix it, or you whatever, I think that it's really important for people to remember that people become teachers because they want to do this job. They want to work with kids and teach people and lead. And there is a huge breakdown between the people who are actually working and doing the work and whoever it is who's making it so difficult for us to just be effective and do our jobs. I think that administration needs to remember what it's like to be a teacher, and I know that they're under a lot of pressure financially. I think that there just needs to be more money, period, in education. And I think that if there was more resources behind it, so many of the problems that we face would be less.
This episode was recorded and produced by me, web layout and design by Aaron Woods, photography by Natalie Jennings. Thank you all for listening. We really appreciate all of your support. And if you're looking for other ways to support us, we're coming up on our 30th episode, which was really exciting. And if you've been along for most of that ride, you know that we can't do this without your help. So if you head over to afaceproject.com, click on the contribute button, there are a bunch of different ways you can help us out, including just giving maybe $1 a month or $10 a month or whatever you can. If this is a program that you enjoy, and if you're also enjoying the magazine, we greatly appreciate anything that you're able to give. Thank you for tuning in, And we will be back in a couple of weeks.